dive right into this pretty significant policy shift that just landed on March 20th of this year. This new executive order, it's called Stopping Waste, Fraud, and Abuse by Eliminating Information Silos. We've really dug into a whole pile of stuff around this. The actual text of the order, all kinds of expert opinions both for and against it, some really deep dives on the cybersecurity and operational challenges, even timelines and key players involved. And really what we're trying to do today is go beyond the headlines, right? Get to the strategic core of what this big data sharing push within the federal government really means. Like, what's the practical impact going to be?
Yeah, this executive order is a strong statement about how the feds are going to manage and use, well, huge amounts of their data. I mean, the core idea here is that there's all this inefficiency and probably a lot of fraud going on just because different parts of the government, they just don't talk to each other. They can't get at each other's data easily. It's about breaking down those walls.
Okay, so efficiency and keeping track of where our tax dollars are really going, that's front and center. And to get there, it sounds like the order basically says, agencies, you've got to share your unclassified data.
Yeah.
Share it internally, share it with each other. Like, no more hiding stuff in these information silos.
Right, exactly. And it's not messing around when it comes to making sure that happens. The order specifically says federal officials, anyone designated by the president or agency heads, they have full and prompt access to all unclassified agency records, data, software systems, the whole nine yards. It's a direct order, not a suggestion.
A very clear directive. And it looks like they want things moving fast. Agency heads have just 30 days, until mid-April, basically, to review their own internal rules, and anything that's blocking this info sharing has got to go. Obviously got to stay within the law, but man, it's clear they're serious about this.
Oh yeah, the speed is definitely notable. And on top of that, within that same 30 days, agencies have got to do a full review of all their regulations about data access, including what are called System of Records Notices, the SORNs, which lay out all the personal data they hold. And then they have to report to the Office of Management and Budget with suggestions for what to get rid of or change. This is a top-down reevaluation of how unclassified data is handled, the whole thing.
And there are a couple of places they're targeting right off the bat.
Yeah.
The Secretary of Labor, for example, gets immediate and complete access to all unemployment data. Seems like they're really prioritizing going after potential fraud in that system. What do you what kind of impact is that immediate access likely to have?
For unemployment data. Could be huge.
Huh.
Now the Department of Labor can immediately cross-reference everything with other sources. They can start finding people who shouldn't be claiming benefits, patterns of suspicious activity that were hidden before in all those silos. It's an early test case for the whole executive order. Very concrete.
And it's not just unemployment. The feds also want full access to data from any state program that gets federal funding, even data held by third parties. That really expands their reach into how states are doing things. What's that going to mean for these state programs?
Well, for them, it probably means a lot more scrutiny from the feds. I mean, the stated goal is to eliminate waste and fraud in how federal money is being used, but it definitely raises questions about the balance of power between the feds and the states. And just imagine the administrative headache for states to provide all this data.
This is not a subtle approach at all. And to make sure everyone gets the message, the order says it overrules any previous executive orders or regulations that clash with it. That's a pretty strong statement of intent.
It's putting this data sharing thing at the top of the priority list for the whole federal government. No question about that. Now, if we look at what our sources say about potential benefits, efficiency is a big one. If agencies can share and use data easily, no more duplication of effort, right? They don't have to collect the same info over and over. They can share analysis, could save a lot of time and taxpayer money.
Makes total sense. Why should multiple agencies be doing the same work in isolation, right? And of course, the other potential win is that it becomes much easier to detect fraud. By connecting the dots between different data sources, theoretically, the government can spot inconsistencies, suspicious patterns, things that would be invisible if each agency was just working with its own little piece of the puzzle. Can you give us a concrete example of how that might actually work?
Sure, imagine this. One agency's got data on income reported to the IRS for taxes, right? Another agency's handling housing assistance, and another one's managing unemployment benefits. If you can securely link up all those data sets, suddenly you can see if someone's claiming benefits from multiple programs but reporting totally different income levels to the tax folks. That kind of mismatch, that's a huge red flag for fraud, but you'd never patch it unless the data was talking to each other.
So it's all about making the connections. But with any big change like this, there are always concerns. And in this case, privacy and civil liberties are right at the top of the list. I mean, putting so much personal data together in one place, it makes people nervous about potential misuse.
And rightfully so. Our sources highlight this fear that once personal information is all centralized and easily accessible, it could be used for purposes that go way beyond the original reasons it was collected. People like Elizabeth Laird at the Center for Democracy and Technology, they're warning that this could be used to target specific groups, maybe based on immigration status, gender identity, or even political beliefs. It's a real worry.
That idea of mission creep is definitely a big concern, right? Where data collected for one reason suddenly starts being used for completely different things. And that could easily lead to what some people call surveillance overreach. The government's ability to collect and analyze our data becomes way too intrusive.
Absolutely. It raises fundamental questions about privacy, like what should people reasonably expect? What are the safeguards to prevent the government from snooping where it shouldn't be? And then there's the cybersecurity risk, which is also huge. I
Right.
mean, when you concentrate tons of sensitive information in one place, the federal government becomes a prime target for hackers. If there's a breach, it could be a disaster, exposing the personal data of millions of people across all these agencies.
It's like making one giant target with a big bullseye on it for anyone with bad intentions. And some of the analyses we've looked at also point out that if the feds pour all their cybersecurity resources into protecting these central systems, it could actually leave state and local governments more vulnerable, right? They might not have the support they need, and that creates weak points in the whole system.
Exactly. You can't forget about the bigger picture. Even if the federal systems are super secure, hackers can still try to get in through weaker state or local systems, and that could give them access to the federal data anyway. And then beyond security and privacy, there are the practical challenges of just making this whole thing work. Think about how complicated it is to try and merge all the different IT systems that federal agencies use. A lot of these systems are ancient, running on outdated tech, not designed to talk to each other.
Right. We're talking about decades of investment in different hardware, software, data formats. You can't just snap your fingers and make it all work together seamlessly. And then there's the problem of different data standards. Even if you can connect the systems, agencies might define or organize the same information in totally different ways. So when you try to combine it, you get errors and misunderstandings. This is where it gets really messy really fast.
Yeah, trying to get the entire federal bureaucracy to agree on common definitions, formats, and how data is shared, that's a massive undertaking. And then on top of that, you have to figure out access control. Who gets to see what, when, and how do you manage and audit all those privileges across every agency involved? It's a logistical and security nightmare on a huge scale.
And one of the things we read also pointed out that this could actually be a problem for agencies with very specific specialized missions. They've often set up their data management in a very particular way to meet their unique needs. So this one-size-fits-all approach to data sharing, it might not work for everyone and could even make some agencies less effective.
It's a valid point. Sometimes trying to make everything uniform actually gets in the way of best practices, especially in highly specialized areas. So they'll need to find a balance, promote sharing, but also make sure agencies with unique needs can still operate effectively.
So, to sum up what we've covered today, this executive order is a huge step towards more data sharing in the federal government. The main goals are to make things more efficient and crack down on waste and fraud. It gives broad access to designated officials and puts agencies on a very tight deadline to remove any roadblocks to information sharing. And while there's definitely potential for streamlining things and getting better at catching fraud, like with the Secretary of Labor and the unemployment data, there are also some big red flags. Individual privacy, increased cybersecurity risks from all that centralized data, and the very real difficulty of making all these different systems work together. It seems like there are a lot of potential benefits, but also a lot of potential problems.
Yeah, it's a tricky balancing act for sure. Whether it works or not really depends on how well the government can handle all these complex issues. It's not just about breaking down the data silos, it's about building a whole new system for data governance, security, and privacy that can work in this much more interconnected world.
And that brings us to some questions for you to think about as you're following all this. How are federal agencies actually going to balance this need for open access with the need to make sure their systems are really secure, that we don't have these massive data breaches? What's going to be done to prevent that mission creep we talked about, to make sure data is only used for its intended purpose, protecting people's privacy and civil liberties? And given all the technical hurdles and the fact that data standards are all over the place, what do you see as the biggest challenges to making interagency data sharing actually work smoothly? Are there any creative solutions out there that could help overcome those challenges? What about this potential shift of cybersecurity resources away from state and local governments Could that end up making federal data less secure in the long run? Do you think these changes to agency regulations and all that will really dismantle those old information silos? Or could there be some unintended consequences we haven't thought of yet? And finally, what's going to happen in the long term with the federal government having so much more access to data from state programs? Will it really lead to more efficiency? Or could it mean more federal control over what states are doing?
Those are the big questions we'll be watching as this whole thing plays out. We're moving into a world where government is more and more digital and interconnected. So the challenge for all of us, especially if you're interested in how our government works, is this. How do we make sure that efficiency and security don't come at the cost of our basic freedoms, our right to privacy in this digital age? It's something to keep thinking about as this policy unfolds.